Welcome back for another deep dive. You know we like to go deep, and today we're picking the brain of acclaimed author Robert Greene.
We're diving into some really fascinating excerpts from a recent conversation he had about self-discovery, purpose, how we navigate relationships, and even how to sidestep all those distractions that pop up.
Yeah, those distractions are everywhere these days. It's like they multiply by the day.
They do. It's almost like they're competing for our attention.
So how do we combat that? I'm ready for some Greene wisdom.
Well, he starts with this idea that each of us, we have this seed of potential within us, and oftentimes it's visible in our childhood passions.
Oh, I like that. A seed of potential. So those things we were drawn to as kids, like the things that made time disappear.
Exactly. Those passions, those interests. It's like they're these signposts pointing us towards our natural inclinations even. It even echoes what we find in established psychological theory.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. Give me some psychological theory.
Think back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mhm.
You've got those impulse voices that he observed in early childhood.
Okay, yeah.
These aren't just whims or passing fancies, but
Yeah.
deep-seated drivers.
Yeah.
They're pushing us toward a path of fulfillment.
It's not just what we think we should be doing, but what truly lights us up. I love that. And Greene actually has a great example from his own childhood. He was completely fascinated by words, played with them constantly, almost obsessively. He became a writer. It's like those tendencies were clues to his future self.
Exactly. The saying, the child is father of the man. It's like those early passions often hold the clues to our strengths, our inherent talents, even if life sort of tries to quiet them down as we grow older.
Because let's be real, as we grow up, we face societal pressures, parental expectations, even what our friends are doing. All that creates this noise that can drown out those inner voices.
Yeah, it's true. And then we end up prioritizing what we should be doing over what really resonates with us deep down.
So how do we crank up the volume on those inner voices again?
It's tough. We kind of have to rediscover those early passions, those seeds of uniqueness that maybe got buried along the way.
Yeah, how do we even begin to dig them up?
Greene actually, he talks about this process of deep introspection. So like an archaeological dig almost. You're carefully brushing away layers of societal conditioning, those external expectations that we kind of internalize over the years. But the payoff is huge.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this payoff. What happens?
Greene says that when you discover your life's task, that unique purpose, it's like suddenly seeing the world in high definition.
Wow, okay.
It's not necessarily about having this rigid plan, but more like having this internal compass.
Yeah.
It's a compass that's always pointing you in the right direction. And it gives you this framework for exploration, for growth, that feels genuinely aligned with who you are.
Okay, that sounds amazing, but how do we know when we've stumbled upon this life's task? What does that even feel like?
That is the million-dollar question. Well, Greene, he describes it as achieving a state of sublime.
Sublime.
Yeah, and it's actually really important to differentiate here between the real sublime and what he calls the false sublime.
Okay, I'm listening.
The false sublime, it's like chasing a sugar rush. Those fleeting pleasures that leave you feeling empty in the end.
Okay.
The real sublime, that's about those experiences that transcend the everyday, the moments when you feel truly connected to something bigger than yourself.
So give me an example. What kind of experiences are we talking about here?
Think about those times where you are so engrossed in something that time just seems to disappear. Maybe it's when you're losing yourself in a creative project, or you connect deeply with another person. It could even be experiencing the awe-inspiring beauty of nature.
I love those moments.
It's different for everyone. But that common thread is that feeling of being completely present, truly alive and aligned. That's the real sublime calling.
Okay, so those moments when you're firing on all cylinders, that's the real sublime. But how do we make them last? How do we actively pursue that feeling, that level of engagement in our lives?
That's where things get really interesting. Because Greene, he argues that to achieve the real sublime, you actually have to get comfortable with something most people try to avoid.
Oh no, what is it?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Wait, isn't that something we should run from?
That's what we're often led to believe. But Greene he flips the script. He says we need to completely reframe our relationship with anxiety.
Okay, I'm listening.
See, anxiety, it often signals that we're on the precipice of something big. Like there's a deeper understanding waiting to be unlocked.
So instead of anxiety being a stop sign, Greene sees it as like a signpost, pointing us towards growth.
Exactly.
So anxiety, not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it could be pointing us towards something amazing. I like that. But Greene, he doesn't stop there, does he? He dives into some other really interesting topics. Power, seduction, things that can sometimes have, well, a negative connotation.
Right, and he redefines these concepts in a way that might surprise you. Like, take power, for example.
Mm.
Greene believes it's a fundamental aspect of human interaction. It's neither inherently good nor bad, but it's certainly powerful.
Yeah.
And instead of thinking about it as manipulation or control, he sees it more as our innate human need to influence and shape our environment.
So it's not about being some kind of like Machiavelli in a suit.
Right. It's not about being manipulative.
It's more about understanding how we can exert influence in a way that feels, I don't know, ethical and aligned with our values.
Exactly. And it's like that saying, the only constant is change, right? We all have the power to create change, whether it's in our own lives or on a larger scale. And Greene argues that understanding the dynamics of power is absolutely crucial for navigating this ever-changing landscape.
This is kind of reminding me of those classic high school movies where everyone's trying to be part of the in crowd. That's the power drive in action, right?
Yada. We all want to feel that sense of belonging, of having influence, of making an impact. The key is recognizing that those deep-seated drives, they exist within us, and then learning how to harness them effectively.
So how do we do that? How do we harness them effectively?
Well, Greene suggests that a big part of it is learning to read the subtext of human interactions.
Oh, you mean like picking up on those nonverbal cues, the things that often speak louder than words?
Exactly. Think about a time that you knew someone wasn't being truthful, even if their words were saying otherwise. It's those subtle shifts in body language, those fleeting facial expressions, those micro moments of hesitation or avoidance. They reveal a lot more than we realize.
It's like we have this built-in radar, but most of us haven't really learned how to use it effectively.
It's true. And that's where Greene encourages us to kind of level up our observation skills. He even points to this fascinating story of Milton Erickson, a renowned psychologist who actually mastered nonverbal communication after being paralyzed by polio.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Because he was physically limited, Erickson had to rely solely on his powers of observation.
Wow.
And he became incredibly attuned to, the subtlest cues in people's behavior. Like, he became a master at reading their true emotions, their motivations.
That's incredible. So how do we become more like Erickson? Are we all just supposed to like sign up for a crash course in nonverbal communication?
Well, it doesn't have to be that formal. Greene suggests something much simpler.
Mm.
Become a student of human behavior.
Okay.
Pay attention. Pay attention to how people interact in their natural environments. Notice their body language, their facial expressions, even the way they move, how they use space.
So instead of like scrolling through social media, we should be observing the world around us, really tuning in to those unspoken signals.
Exactly. It's like Greene is giving us permission to be curious about human behavior in a whole new way.
I like it. So this is all fascinating stuff, but I have to be honest, it's also a bit overwhelming. I mean, life is already complicated enough without having to analyze every interaction.
I hear you. And that's actually a perfect segue into Greene's advice on navigating the modern world, which, let's face it, is full of choices, information overload, and, those ever-present distractions we talked about.
Oh, don't get me started.
He has some really helpful insights on how to create order out of all of that chaos.
Okay, I'm all ears. So how do we apply Greene's wisdom to our daily lives? Especially when it comes to something as, complex as relationships.
Well, he emphasizes the importance of what he calls convergence when choosing a life partner.
Convergence, but not just any convergence, right?
Yeah.
He's not just talking about like shared tastes in music or movies.
You're right. This goes much deeper.
Right.
He's talking about shared values, core beliefs, those really fundamental aspects of life that shape who we are and what we want out of our relationships.
So it's about finding someone who aligns with you on those big picture things, finances, lifestyle, ambition, even how you approach conflict. It reminds me of that story Greene told about using his cat as a test on a first date.
Right. It sounds funny, but it highlights a really crucial point.
It does.
It's about identifying those deal breakers early on. Those fundamental differences that can create friction, resentment down the line.
Yeah.
And it's not about finding someone exactly like you, but finding someone who shares your values, who respects your non-negotiables.
Instead of feeling overwhelmed by endless options, which, let's face it, can be paralyzing, Greene encourages us to get crystal clear on our own values, right?
Absolutely.
That way we can approach relationships with intention, choosing partners who complement us, who inspire us, rather than complicate our lives.
Exactly. And that same principle, it actually applies to how we manage that constant influx of information in the digital age.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like we're constantly bombarded with news and social media updates and notifications, all vying for our attention. It can be exhausting.
Absolutely. And Green is really wary of how that constant noise can affect our well-being, our ability to focus on what truly matters. He's particularly concerned about the rise of platforms like Nextdoor, which he believes often amplify negativity and fear.
I know what you mean. Sometimes it feels like you go down this rabbit hole of negativity just scrolling through those neighborhood updates. Like, is the world really that bad?
Right. And constantly exposing yourself to that, it can be so draining. It can
Mhm.
make the world feel much scarier, much more chaotic than it actually is.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
It really is. And Green, he's not saying stick your head in the sand, but he's just saying, instead of just passively consuming whatever pops up on your screen, be more discerning about where you direct your attention.
Choosing quality over quantity, being mindful of the information we're taking in. It's like creating a healthy diet for our minds, just like we try to do with our bodies.
Exactly. Green, he's all about curating your information diet carefully.
Hmm.
He says focus on sources that are constructive, inspiring, and of course, aligned with your values. And it's not just about that external information either.
Oh, what else?
It's about managing that internal chatter too,
Yeah.
that constant stream of thoughts and worries and to-do lists that can sometimes drown out our deeper sense of purpose.
It's like trying to have a conversation with yourself, but it's just all noise.
Exactly. And that actually reminds me, Green talks about this concept of death ground. It's a strategy that he actually borrowed from the art of war, which,
Sounds intense.
it does sound intense. But it's about harnessing a sense of urgency, to fuel your actions and clarify your priorities.
Mm.
Imagine an army. They're backed against a wall. They're fighting with everything they've got because their lives depend on it, right?
Oh, wow.
That's the energy that Green wants us to tap into, not from a place of fear, though, but from a deep understanding that our time and energy are precious.
Okay, so embracing that sense of urgency, not in a panicked way, but as a reminder to really make the most of each day, to prioritize what truly matters and not get bogged down by all the trivial stuff.
Exactly. And when you operate from that death ground mentality, your priorities, they become crystal clear. You're less likely to waste time on distractions or get sidetracked by things that don't align with your goals. It's like that saying, we all have the same 24 hours in a day.
We do.
It's not about having more time. It's about being more intentional with the time that we do have.
And that really resonates, especially in today's world. It's so fast-paced, it's easy to get, well, caught up in all the busyness of it all.
It really is. And this actually brings us back to the importance of vulnerability and authenticity in our relationships, which we touched on earlier.
Hmm.
Green, he argues that in a world that's so obsessed with appearances, it's more important than ever to let go of our masks and just be our true selves.
It's like we're so busy curating this like perfect version of ourselves online that we forget how to be genuine, vulnerable in our real life interactions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Green, he believes that true connection, it requires us to move beyond those superficial layers and embrace vulnerability. He sees it as a strength, not a weakness,
Love that.
that willingness to be open, to be authentic, even when it feels a little bit risky.
Letting go of the need to control how other people perceive us and just allowing ourselves to be seen for who we truly are, flaws and all.
Exactly. And you know what? All of this actually ties in beautifully with Green's insights on seduction, which we also touched on earlier.
Okay.
He believes that true seduction, it isn't about manipulation or games. It's about creating a space where both people feel safe enough to let their guard down.
So it's less about like, I don't know, techniques and more about creating an environment of trust, of genuine connection, a space where that vulnerability can really flourish.
You got it. It's about being present, being authentic, and allowing that genuine connection to unfold organically. And that requires courage, curiosity, and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
I love that. And, it all circles back to Greene's belief in the incredible power of the human brain, which we've talked about a lot today. In a world that's, increasingly obsessed with artificial intelligence, he reminds us that we already possess something far more remarkable.
He does. He even goes so far as to call the human brain the greatest creation in the known universe.
Wow.
Think about it, our capacity for love, for creativity, innovation, empathy. These are all products of this incredible organ that we often take for granted.
It really is a good reminder, especially as AI gets more sophisticated. Like, yeah, algorithms can analyze data, make predictions, but they can't replicate the complexity of human emotion, the nuances of our experiences, the depth of our imaginations.
Exactly. And Greene, he actually worries that our over-reliance on technology, especially things like ChatGPT, for example, could actually hinder our ability to think for ourselves.
Almost makes us intellectually lazy.
In a way, yeah. He uses this really great analogy to illustrate this point. Imagine climbing Mount Everest. It's an arduous journey, right? Full of challenges, setbacks, but the sense of accomplishment when you reach the summit, unparalleled.
Yes.
Now, imagine taking a helicopter to the top instead.
Okay, yeah.
You get the same view, but you miss the entire experience, the growth that comes from pushing your own limits.
That's so true. Like they say, the journey is just as important as the destination. It's those challenges, those moments of struggle that really shape us, that make us who we are.
Precisely. And Greene, he believes that true fulfillment, it doesn't come from taking shortcuts or outsourcing our thinking.
Yeah.
It comes from engaging with life's challenges head on, from cultivating our curiosity and really tapping into that vast reservoir of potential that we all have within us.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Robert Greene's insights, I think we're left with a final thought to ponder. If the human brain is this incredible creation capable of, extraordinary things, what are we doing to nurture its potential? How can we cultivate our own curiosity, challenge our assumptions, and really embrace the unknown with that sense of courage and adventure?
Those are the questions.
Mhm.
Those are the questions Greene wants us to ask ourselves. And I think it's important to remember that self-discovery, it's a lifelong journey.
It is.
It's one that requires us to be both students and explorers. It's about continually seeking new knowledge, challenging our perspectives, and pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones.
I love that. Always more to learn, more to explore, more to uncover, both within ourselves and in the world around us. So keep diving deep, keep asking those questions, and keep seeking those moments of awe and inspiration that make life truly worth living.
Beautifully said. And thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the work of Robert Greene. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to unlock a bit of your own hidden potential.
And wow, you guys, I can already tell this isn't your average self-help stuff.
Definitely not.
We're talking like the deep stuff, purpose, motivation, how our brains are wired for this kind of stuff, unearthing your unique path, even, and this is key, even as an adult.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how Greene frames this whole thing. It's not so much about finding the perfect job title, right?
Right.
It's more like sensing a direction, like you were saying, almost like a magnetic north for your life.
Oh, I like that.
And he has this whole thing about how each person is like a unique phenomenon of our DNA, our experiences. Like it's never happened before and it's never going to happen again.
Okay, I feel that.
Right.
Like, even if we wanted to be exactly like someone else, we literally couldn't. Like, it's impossible.
Exactly. And that actually connects to this idea of multiple intelligences, right? We often put so much emphasis on, the intellectual stuff.
The book smarts.
Yeah, exactly. The book smarts. But there's also like the kinesthetic, the social, the musical, all these different ways of being intelligent.
Yeah.
And Greene's point is that this unique blend, it's there from the get-go, almost like a seed that's planted at birth.
Right. And he talks about people like Steve Jobs, like even as a kid, just captivated by how things work. Like there was already this pull, even at 7 or 8 years old, towards technology.
Well, yeah.
But then, life happens.
Life happens, exactly. And that's the real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like we get older and suddenly everyone's got an opinion about what we should be doing,
Yeah.
Parents, teachers, friends, even just like the practicalities of paying rent and stuff. It all becomes this kind of noise that drowns out that original signal.
Ugh, the noise. I feel like that's what resonates with so many people, myself included. Like you reach adulthood and maybe you haven't figured it all out, but there's this nagging feeling, this curiosity, this what if I miss my calling kind of thing But Greene says it's not too late.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He actually really emphasizes that rediscovering this purpose, this, like you said, this seed, it's an active process. He even compares it, and this is kind of out there, but he compares it to archaeology. Like you're digging through these layers of, those early fascinations, those moments of pure, like effortless engagement.
So it's not just about like thinking back to what we liked as a kid, but almost trying to feel it again.
Yes.
That sense of being totally absorbed in something.
Precisely. And this is actually where Huberman's work is so fascinating. He talks about how those moments of deep engagement, flow states, I think they're often called, they trigger like this whole cascade of neurochemicals in our brains, right?
Oh, yeah.
Dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
They basically hijack our reward system and tell us, yes, this, more of this.
Oh, this is making my brain light up. Honestly, when I first read Mastery, it was like something clicked. I remembered this thing I used to do as a kid. I would get this like tingling in my arm whenever I was explaining something I was really passionate about.
Wow.
And guess how? I still get it. It was
Yeah.
like it's like physical proof, that I'm on the right track, even if I don't always know what the track is.
That's amazing. And it speaks to how deeply ingrained these passions can be, even if we've like buried them under years of, other stuff. But, and here's where Greene throws a curveball. He says what we hate, what we're repelled by, can be just as informative as what we love.
Wait, really? Okay, you got to explain that one.
Think about it. Maybe there was a subject in school you just couldn't stand right, or a job you quit after a week, or even just a hobby you tried and like utterly failed at. Those experiences, those aversions, they tell us something too. They reveal our values, our sensitivities, the things we absolutely don't want in our lives. And that can be just as valuable as knowing what we do want.
So it's like instead of just chasing the whole follow your bliss mantra, we should also pay attention to the things that kind of make us cringe.
Yes.
Because even those negative emotions, maybe especially those, they can point us in the right direction.
Exactly. It's about understanding the why behind those negative emotions.
Yeah.
Like, what is it about that experience that's so repellent? What need of yours is not being met? And once you start like digging into those questions, man, what you uncover can be incredible. And that actually brings us to a concept Greene rarely talks about publicly, but he dives into it with Huberman, this idea of the sublime.
Okay, the sublime. It sounds, I don't know, kind of intense and honestly a little intimidating. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, think about those moments. Those moments that just like take your breath away. And I don't mean just beautiful, but like awe-inspiring. Like you're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, or you look up and see the Milky Way on a perfectly clear night.
Okay, yeah.
Greene says those experiences, those point to something larger, something beyond like our everyday awareness.
Okay, I'm getting chills just thinking about it, but does it have to be some huge, like, life-altering event?
Not necessarily, no. Greene actually, he talks about how he had a near-death experience. So,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
which, I mean, I think that qualifies.
Yeah.
But he also says that the sublime exists in these subtler forms too.
Okay.
Like a deep connection with another person, or a sudden insight that just like shifts your whole perspective.
Yeah.
Even just that feeling of being totally absorbed in something that you love, when you're like in the flow.
You know what? That reminds me of something. Years ago, I was going through this rough patch, like really questioning everything. And I ended up taking the solo trip to the coast. And one night I stayed up late, just walking along the beach. It was a full moon. The water looked like, I don't know, like liquid silver. It's hard to describe. But
Yeah.
I just felt this overwhelming sense of peace, Like I was part of something so much bigger than myself. It was like a reset button got hit in my brain.
That's a perfect example of what we're talking about. And Greene argues that these experiences, they're not just like these feel-good moments. They hold these important clues about our purpose, like our place in the world.
So how do we find more of those moments? Like, do we all need to, like, book a flight to the nearest natural wonder?
Well, that's where it gets a little tricky. See, Greene, he makes this distinction between what he calls the real sublime and the false sublime.
Oh, okay.
So these like, drugs or cults, even the constant dopamine hits of social media.
Right.
These can mimic that feeling of transcendence, that feeling of being connected to something bigger.
But it's fleeting. Right.
Exactly.
It's like a sugar rush. Like, I've definitely had those moments where I like get lost in the endless scroll, but it always leaves me feeling kind of empty afterward.
Exactly. The real sublime, it has to come from within.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating that deep connection to yourself, to your purpose, to something, yes, like you said, something larger than yourself. And that, Greene argues, is the key to a truly fulfilling life.
This is all so powerful, but it also feels a bit, I don't know, heady. Like, how do we take these big ideas about purpose and the sublime and like bring them into our everyday lives, especially in a world that often feels, let's be honest, driven by power, and not always in the most positive ways. Speaking of power, I mean, he's pretty well known for his thoughts on that, isn't he?
He is, yeah. And in some ways, this is where things get really, really interesting. Because while Greene definitely doesn't like shy away from the realities of power dynamics, in this conversation, he actually kind of reframes the whole concept.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. How so?
Well, he starts by acknowledging that power at its core is simply about having control, right? Like control over our environment, our choices, our lives. It's a fundamental human need, just like food or shelter. We all crave it.
That makes sense. Like we all want to feel like we have like some agency, some say in what happens to us.
Exactly. But here's the catch. We're often like ashamed of that desire for power, especially like in ourselves. We're
Yeah.
taught to see it as something negative, something greedy or manipulative.
And that's where things get messy, right? Because when we try to deny that part of ourselves, it just comes out in these other ways, like office politics or passive aggressive comments, even just like trying to control the people we love.
Precisely. And this is where Greene brings in this whole concept of seduction.
Hmm.
And before you jump to conclusions, he's not just talking about like romance or pickup artistry or anything like that. He's talking about any time we influence someone, anytime we persuade them to move in a certain direction, whether it's, closing a business deal or getting your kids to eat their vegetables.
So seduction, as in like the art of influence,
Yeah.
it's starting to feel like everything really is connected. Like Green's drawing this map of human behavior.
He is, yeah. And here's the most fascinating part, okay? Greene argues that true seduction, like real seduction, requires vulnerability. In fact, he even suggests that seduction as an art was, get this, invented by women.
Hold on. Women invented seduction, as in because they often held less overt power in society, they had to find other ways to exert influence.
That's exactly Greene's point. It was a way of navigating a world where the rules were kind of stacked against them.
Hmm?
And this is where Huberman's work on the brain adds another, like, whole other layer to this. He talks about how even something as primal as like mounting, which we often associate with, dominance, actually has separate neural circuits from sex.
Okay.
It's more about establishing hierarchy, which is like deeply, deeply ingrained in our social wiring,
Hmm.
regardless of gender.
Wait, you're blowing my mind here. So it's not just about the physical act, it's about something like deeper, something wired into our social brains.
Exactly. And this ties back to Greene's point about seduction.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. What's the most effective way to lower someone's defenses? To get them to, like, let you in? It's to make yourself vulnerable first. It's about showing your hand, so to speak, which creates trust and allows for a more genuine connection.
This is a lot to process, but it's making me see things in a whole new light. Like if these power dynamics, these seductive forces, if they're so like hardwired into us, how do we even begin to navigate them in a way that feels, I don't know, authentic, that doesn't turn into some kind of manipulative game? And
Yeah.
and what does any of this have to do with love, which Greene, shockingly, is writing about these days?
Okay, so we've gone from the sublime to the, well, I guess slightly less sublime world of power and seduction, and now love. This is where I thought Greene might really throw me for a loop, but hearing him talk about it with Huberman, like there's this tenderness there that I wasn't expecting. Yeah, it is kind of surprising, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for people who, mostly know him for 48 Laws of Power and all that. But
Yeah.
but he actually is working on this whole chapter about love for his new book, and it's fascinating. Like, he describes this study about, get this, single-celled organisms,
Hmm.
paramecium,
Okay.
and how even at that level, even at that microscopic level, there's this drive to like merge, to
Yeah.
connect.
So even before we're talking about like emotions and romance and all that, there's something fundamentally like hardwired into us that seeks that unity.
Exactly. And it ties back to what we were talking about earlier about vulnerability being a strength. Because in order to really truly connect with someone, to experience love in like its deepest sense, we have to be willing to let go of control, to
Yeah.
be open to something beyond ourselves.
That's beautiful, but it also, I don't know, it also feels kind of daunting in a way. Especially like these days with
Yeah.
with hookup culture and social media and like the rise of AI and all that, it seems like everywhere you turn, there's something telling us to like keep our options open, to prioritize the instant gratification over the genuine connection.
Yeah, and Greene is deeply, deeply concerned about this. He argues that these technologies, while they're, obviously incredible in a lot of ways, they're also contributing to
Yeah.
this growing sense of isolation, alienation. Like people are becoming more and more afraid of vulnerability,
Yeah.
of the risks that come with truly opening themselves up to another person.
It's like we're so bombarded with these like surface level connections with curated versions of ourselves that we're like losing the ability to connect on that deeper level. And it's not just romantic relationships either, right? It's our friendships, our families, even our relationship with ourselves that suffers.
100%. And this is where I think Greene's work intersects with Huberman's in a really, really profound way. Because Huberman talks about how, like, our brains are literally wired for connection, how social interaction is, like, essential for our well-being. But he also emphasizes the importance of quality over quantity.
Yeah.
It's not just about being around people. It's about feeling seen, heard, understood.
Which brings us back to that challenge we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
right? How do we find that real connection, that genuine sense of belonging in a world that just feels so saturated with noise?
Yeah.
When it feels like everything is like designed to keep us, I don't know, distracted and divided and ultimately disconnected.
Right. And Greene, he doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but he does offer a glimmer of hope, I think.
Yeah.
He believes that people will eventually tire of the emptiness,
Yeah.
the superficiality of it all, that deep down we all crave something more, something real. And he sees his new book as kind of like a part of that shift, a call to reclaim our capacity for love and connection and genuine, like, human interaction.
That's a powerful message, and I think it's a call to action for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be more intentional about how we connect, both with ourselves and with others, to cultivate those deep, meaningful relationships that really like give our lives purpose, that give our lives meaning. So to everyone listening, like, what's one small step you can take today, right now, to reconnect with that deeper part of yourself? Maybe it's reaching out to a loved one. Maybe it's putting down your phone for a few hours. Maybe it's just taking some time for like quiet reflection. Whatever it is, make it a point to prioritize that connection, both with yourself and with the people who matter most, because in the end, that's what truly matters.